This is Under Review. I'm Jordan Long. We all know that the Super Bowl is this Sunday as the Cincinnati Bengals take on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this really got me thinking, how do my team that I follow and like, the Denver Broncos, become a playoff team next year? I understand you need a quarterback. That's what Kansas City has in Patrick Mahomes. Las Vegas has with Derek Carr. The Chargers, even the LA Chargers, have a franchise quarterback and Justin Herbert. And that's why they're going to be in the playoff mix and even win the AFC West division title. That's because of their quarterback play, like I just laid out. Denver needs to upgrade the quarterback. Will that be a Russell Wilson? Will that be an Aaron Rodgers or somebody else, or even draft one? I am not sure, but that's a debate for another time. There are other areas Denver needs to fix as well. Of course, it's the offensive line, the linebacker core, and the secondary. Looking at the offensive line, it struggled at times and pretty much throughout the whole season. There are many times that Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, the quarterback, didn't have time to throw the football because of the fact that they were getting pressured. Even the running backs had a tough time running the football because of that offensive line. Now, if you look at the offensive line as a whole, they gave up 40 sacks. Denver has to figure out a way to protect their quarterbacks and have time to throw the football. It seemed like any time that either Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater went back to pass, there was pressure in their face. So fixing that has to be key. Now, if you look at the linebacker core, you can look at Bradley Chubb. He's the only one under contract. He was hurt and only appeared in 7 games and no sacks. After him, the Broncos have to figure out what to do. They need to re-sign or could re-sign Josie Jewell and Alexander Johnson, who are free agents. These are the 2 linebackers they should keep. Johnson is a good tackler and actually can play in coverage. He can pressure the quarterback. Jewell can tackle and also sack the quarterback, and sometimes Josie Jewell is on special teams. Both of these guys, they need to think about keeping, and I hope George Payton goes ahead and said, okay, we're going to keep those guys. Kenny Young is also a free agent. He played well for Denver after the trade from the Rams, appearing in 7 games. Young had 46 tackles and actually 6 for a loss. He also had 2 quarterback hits. That would make a lot of sense for him to be back. After that, the Broncos need to improve the linebacker core. They must look at other free agents who can help not only in coverage, but bring pressure. Denver does not do well covering screens or even a tight end when they go out. That is not good. They also have to have a linebacker who can bring pressure. Some they may consider are Dante Hightower and Anthony Barr, among others. Dante Hightower had 15 games, actually played in 15 games for New England this past season. He can tackle with 64 tackles and 1 for a loss this year. He can also put pressure on the quarterbacks with 4 quarterback hits. He's not a guy that will play in coverage, but he's more a guy that can help the Broncos stop the run. Anthony Barr, though, is a coverage linebacker. This past season for Minnesota, he had 5 passes defended and 3 interceptions. Barr is the type of linebacker the Broncos could use. In terms of tackling, Barr had 72 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and 6 quarterback hits. Looking at the Broncos secondary, Denver needs to address the safety position and quarterback position. Safety is the question. Do you keep Kareem Jackson? I say yes because of what he can do, and he's their hardest hitter in the secondary. He had 88 tackles, 1 pick, and 1 sack. The Broncos, though, may let him go. Not really sure if they'll find another safety who will play opposite of Justin Simmons. And that's what Kareem Jackson did. But they will either go in the free agent market or they draft one. In terms of cornerbacks, they are most likely going to lose Kyle Fuller and Bryce Callahan. Fuller was a complete disappointment. He was burned so many times in coverage, and that allowed the quarterbacks to find the receiver he was covering because he was nowhere on coverage. He didn't play tight coverage. It was a nice pass, and boom, it would have been a 10, 15, 20-yard gain. In 16 games, Fuller did not have an interception, which is why he could be gone. Fuller had 4 passes defended and added 51 tackles. Now, Bryce Callahan, they may not be signed by the Denver Broncos, even though that I think he should be, because he had 29 tackles and 4 passes defended. So now with both of these guys gone, free agency or the draft is where you're going to go. The Broncos must find somebody to play opposite Patrick Surtain and as well as Ronald Darby. Those are the only 2 cornerbacks that are signed right now are Patrick Surtain and Ronald Darby. As for the Broncos secondary, it has to improve. They had 13 picks. That's not terrible, but that isn't great. You need more turnovers to give the offense another chance to score touchdowns and have great field position. As for the Broncos, those are just a few areas they should look to improve to become a playoff team. As we all know, they haven't been to the playoffs since they won Super Bowl 50. And hopefully with the new new head coach in Nathaniel Hackett, which Nathaniel Hackett is now the new head coach, that will change. But he also needs an offensive line, a new cornerbacks, secondary, and linebacker. So we'll see what will happen with them. Now, staying in the NFL has announced a new place for international games, Munich, Germany. The NFL is trying to expand the NFL game globally. And I do like that they're trying to do that. Now, if you look at last year, only 2 games were held in London, England, or at least England. Those were the New York Jets versus the Atlanta Falcons and the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on Miami. There's usually 3 or 4, but unfortunately with the pandemic, there were only 2. The Falcons beat the Jets in week 5, 27-20. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars seem to always play in England and have a home game there. It's like their second home. This has been going on since 2013 to have the Jacksonville Jaguars have one English game. So basically, they go overseas each year. Anyway, they beat the Miami Dolphins 23-20 in week 6. Now, the NFL loves these games. They are trying to make the game more global. That isn't the worst thing. Looking at the 2022 season, the one that's coming up, there will be 3 games in London, 1 in Mexico, and 1 in Munich, Germany. Now, I used to be way against these games because each team had 8 home games for the regular season. Those are not that many. That would mean a home team, which let's just say it's the Denver Broncos and the San Francisco 49ers, which happened a few years ago. I believe Denver was the home team, so they lost a home game. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that a home team loses a home game. The vendors there are the ones who miss out on 1 game of revenue, which could be a lot. Now, with the added 17th game, that's 9 home games, while others have 8. Now, I'm fine having an international game because it makes it easier. Say if you have 9 home games to have 1 internationally, you're not going to lose that much revenue. I'm fine with that. You still get the 8 games. Now, as for the international sites, Mexico makes a lot of sense as an international site. The reason is simple. Mexico isn't that far away to have a normal week for these football teams. There isn't the time change really. Sure, you have to get used to the altitude in Mexico, but otherwise you're not changing the time, which is fine. Plus, a franchise who plays there does not need a bye week right after it. It makes sense. London and Munich don't make a whole lot of sense. London and Munich, you have the time change, which that is not a great thing. As of right now, England is 7 hours ahead of Colorado. When a game kicks off at 11 Mountain Time, it's 6 p.m. in England. That doesn't sound like a big deal, but when they kick off at 7 a.m., that's 2 p.m. in England. It's very difficult for a fan from Colorado to want to wake up early to watch the Broncos when they play in England. Luckily, that hasn't happened, but if it does, I don't know how many people would be willing to get up on a Sunday at 7 a.m., even if it's the Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams, or Chargers, or the 49ers. That would be a 6 a.m. kickoff in California. The later kickoff makes more sense. Not only that, teams that travel there sometimes don't get there until a few days before, which honestly does not make sense because that's not enough time for them to get ready and get used to the time change. Also, they receive a bye week after that week, which is fine. But for Munich, it makes even less sense. Now, I don't know how many people would fill a stadium because London clearly does, but it could be full. But that's not the issue. The issue, again, is the time change. Munich, Germany is even later than London, England, or England. It's 1 hour ahead of London, England. It's the time that's the issue. Kickoff needs to be at a reasonable time in the United States. The NFL should start with a preseason game in Munich, Germany, just to see the interest. They're not going to, obviously, because they are going to play a regular season game. It's just one game, and I don't know how many people would actually go and fill up that stadium. The NFL got this wrong. They should have just kept Mexico because that has worked, and England. But the fact of the matter is they want to make the game more global, so they added Munich, Germany. Then again, I really hope it's successful in Germany as it's been in Mexico and London. If it is, we could see more NFL expansion in terms of these international games. I've also heard that there might be a Super Bowl in London, England. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, but the fact of the matter is they are expanding the game globally, which is a great thing for the NFL. It's more revenue. On to Von Miller. We know Von Miller is in the Super Bowl this year with the LA Rams. The Broncos, and I hated this trade just to see Von Miller go. He was traded from the Denver Broncos to the LA Rams on November 3rd. At the time, I was completely disappointed because he's a Hall of Fame player. You don't normally trade a Hall of Fame player in his prime, but I got it. But on the flip side, Von Miller has a chance to win a ring. Von Miller, though, is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He could sign with anybody he wants. Could Denver want him back? The answer is simply yes. Why not? This is a team that drafted him. This is a franchise that brought him into what he is today as a Hall of Fame player. He could come back. This is his home. He played almost 10 years for the team and was drafted by them second overall in the 2011 NFL draft. That could say to him, hey, I want to come back home. The problem with Denver and the reason why I don't see a homecoming with Von Miller is because Denver is rebuilding. They have a new head coach in Nathaniel Hackett. Although Hackett could say, hey, I want Von Miller to help build our defense. But that could still tell Von Miller, hey, they're rebuilding. They're not going to be a playoff team next year. Maybe not even the year after. I want to chase more rings. So that would tell Miller not to come back home. Denver may not improve from their 7-10 record. So the Broncos went 7-10 last year, and that may not improve with Nathaniel Hackett. I'm happy Hackett is here because he's an offensive guy, but you still need a defense. It might even be worse. Denver's best option, Miller's best option, is to play, say, 2 or 3 more years. So Von Miller may play 2 or 3 more years with another team and then come back to Denver. That could give him 2 or 3 more seasons with the team to win multiple Super Bowls. He has his chance this year. Maybe the Rams bring him back and they go back to the Super Bowl next year and the year after. You don't know. On that is up to him and the Denver Broncos. But the thing about Von Miller is Shannon Sharpe did the same thing. He played a few years with the Baltimore Ravens. He spent time with the Broncos from 1990 to 1999. Sharpe wasn't traded, though. That's the big difference. He went to Baltimore for the 2000 and 2001 season. He won a ring with the Ravens when the Ravens beat the Giants in Super Bowl 35. But the fact of the matter is, he came home and played 2 years for the Denver Broncos from 2002 to 2003. Now, Von Miller could follow in those footsteps and say, hey, I'm going to go play for LA, the Rams, or another team that has a chance to win a Super Bowl. But then I want to come back to Denver. I am fine with that. It's up to him. Von Miller, though, still has the next 2 to 3 years to play. He still has some left in the tank. It could be less than that, especially with his health problems. But the fact of the matter is he's going to be a Hall of Fame player. The thing that he could do is say, hey, I'm going to retire, and then sign a one-day contract to retire as a member of the Denver Broncos. Miller, though, will do what is best for him. So Von Miller will do what is best for him. But the way it ended in Denver to trade him is probably the best way it could, because he could have said, I'm a free agent, I'm leaving. But he also said he bleeds orange and blue in his blood. So could he come back to the Denver Broncos? Yes, he has a family here. His son is here. And of course, he loves the city. Then again, Miller is going to do what is best for him. But for him to come back, I just do not see it. But then again, a one-day contract to retire as a member of the Denver Broncos is perfect. He is going to be in the Ring of Fame for the Denver Broncos, as well as the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Those two are next for him. But once the season is over, whether the Rams win the Super Bowl or not, he has a decision to make. But could I see him in orange and blue? Yes, but maybe not next year. But he definitely will retire as a member of the Denver Broncos. Turning our attention, and finally, to the Colorado Rockies. We know there's a lockout in Major League Baseball. I don't know exactly what's going on and what they're fighting over, but it's ridiculous. I think this should have been the week that teams head out to spring training, get ready for the season. That's obviously not happening because they're fighting over money. It's billionaires versus millionaires. I know both sides don't like each other, and that has been obvious, but there are some issues they need to resolve so we can have baseball. The average fan doesn't care about the lockout, except for they want baseball back. So turning our attention to the Colorado Rockies, even with the lockout, that didn't stop the Colorado Rockies from giving manager Bud Black a one-year extension. Black's original contract was going to end after this year. I get it in a way. The thing is, this could be a shortened year from 162. No idea how short it could be since they haven't started. I could see 140, 130, but it's not going to be 162 games. As for Bud Black, this will mark his 6th year in Colorado. His first 2 years were great. You could even say it was a dream that he came to Colorado as the manager. In 2017, his first year, Colorado went 87-75, earning the playoffs as the wildcard team. In the wildcard game, it didn't go so well. They lost 11-8. In 2018, Colorado finished the regular season at 91-72. Now, that was one of the better seasons that I can remember because they were almost going to defeat the Dodgers to be the best in the National League West Division. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but they still ended the regular season at 91-72. Again, they were one of the two wildcard teams in the National League. In 2017, they lost to the Arizona Diamondbacks 11-8. And this one was kind of a happier ending for the Colorado Rockies because they defeated the Chicago Cubs 2-1 in 13 innings. Now in the divisional round, that's kind of where the season went bad. They lost in 3 games, they were swept in 3 games. They were outscored 13-2 by the Milwaukee Brewers. So the Brewers swept them, and the Rockies couldn't get their offense going as they were outscored 13-2. It was the first time in the Colorado Rockies history they made the postseason in back-to-back years. After that, the magic hasn't returned to Lodell. If you don't know what that is, that's lower downtown. In 2019, they finished at 71-91. The COVID shortened year in 2020, 26-34. Last year, they were 74-87. So overall, if you add all this up, Bud Black is 349-359 as the manager of the Colorado Rockies, a winning percentage of .493. Now, if you go back to last year, the Rockies were a great hitting team. Their offense wasn't a problem, hitting .249 with a team batting average, which was 8th in Major League Baseball. So they could hit at .249, 8th in Major League Baseball. The Rockies' offense wasn't a problem, but they couldn't hit home runs, which is really surprising because of Coors Field. They totaled 182 home runs 21st in Major League Baseball. It made me wonder, what did Bud Black see during batting practice? I'm not even sure they practiced hitting a home run. It didn't seem to matter because the batters didn't change the way they smacked a baseball. It would have been nice to see them hit more home runs, but there's still a chance to do it this year. Now, when it comes to pitching, that is Bud Black's specialty. That was a huge problem. And if you know the history of the Colorado Rockies, it's always been a problem. It didn't carry them with a team ERA of 4.82. So the team ERA was 4.82, 25th in Major League Baseball. Starters couldn't keep them in games with an ERA of 4.77, 21st in Major League Baseball. Black, I don't know what his problem was. He didn't want to take starters out when they didn't have it. By the time he did, their deficit was too large. Even in tight games, he would try to go to the bullpen, but the bullpen he couldn't even trust. I don't understand what was wrong with the Colorado Rockies pitching, if I'm going to be completely honest. The bullpen's era was a disappointing 4.91, 26th in baseball. So the bullpen didn't keep the Rockies in games, and the pitching, obviously the starters didn't either. So if you add that all up, that's why they struggled last year. Even in tight games, though, like I said, the bullpen couldn't save them. But for the Rockies to be successful, they have to be better in terms of pitching. Black knows and has to be able to say, okay, you don't have it this day. We're going to go to the bullpen. Oh, that reliever is struggling. Let's go to this guy. He doesn't do that, and I don't understand why, because Bud Black is really smart. He knows the game of baseball, and if you know anything about baseball, pitching has to be there. Now, if the pitching isn't there, that could cost Bud Black his job. Now, I understand why he had a one-year extension, and I get it. He isn't the one that picked out these players, but rather the general manager. Bud Black has to manage the players that he's dealt. Now, I understand why he gets a one more year extension, because of the fact that it's a lockout. We don't know when it's going to end. But Bud Black, did he really deserve it? If you look at it, not really. But then again, it's a lockout shortened year, and who knows when we're going to play baseball. I think the only way he ends up staying with the Colorado Rockies beyond, let's say, this year or next year, is you really need to have a successful year. I think for him, if they're a few games below 500, that'll save his job. We're talking, 75 games or 78. But if you go ahead and lose 69, 68, that won't be good enough. I do think that an awful year for him. Would they really fire him? In the past, I would have said no, and I'm still going to say no, because the Rockies don't believe in change. So maybe not. Even if the Rockies lose 100 games, Bud Black is still going to be the manager for the Colorado Rockies this year and next year. And then by that time, who knows what will happen. I still think in order for him to have more time, the Rockies have to be at 500 or close to it next year. Now, I'm not thinking playoffs, because they are not a team that's going to make the playoffs. Anything less, though, than being close to 500, it's a failure, and Bud Black has to go. So we will wait and see what the Rockies do with Bud Black, but at least he gets a one-year extension. I'm Jordan Long. This has been Under Review. Follow me on Twitter at SportsScoop1. Also read my blog that I write Mondays through Fridays. And also I have a podcast on Fridays at sports-scoop.com. This has been a Sideline Sports production.